All right, this is Nate. You can also call me Nathan, but please never call me Nathaniel. And welcome to the final part of the card review series, reviewing every Monster Train card. This time we're featuring the Clanless card and final ratings. This includes updates from the recent patch. So I will talk about changes, talk about re-ratings, talk about, basically the entire set of cards. So with that, let's jump into the setup. Review will cover every card and every clan. This is now talking about Clanless, but the champions and artifacts will still be covered as part of a separate series of videos. So the plan is to do a video just on champions and then a video just on the artifacts. We will be reviewing cards in context of standard play, so ignoring multiplayer, mutators, daily challenges, and so on. And the cards are not reviewed in a vacuum, but rather how they function within the common build archetypes where they exist. A little bit weird for clanless cards, but in general, they're still... you need to think about how does this card play out when you're going to get it in different types of builds that are available. Rating scale is unchanged. It's still S, which are cards that are powerful in virtually all situations. You have A cards, which are situationally powerful cards that at worst are strong cards. Bs are generally strong cards or situationally powerful cards that are otherwise average, with a plus or minus being an indication of how easy is it to achieve the powerful effect from the card. C cards are generally average or a situationally powerful card that is otherwise very weak, with a plus minus indicating how easy it is it to get a strong or a powerful effect from the card. And finally, D cards are generally weak cards that don't really have a case for a strong or a powerful situation. So, common clanless builds. Well, it's not really that many clanless builds per se, but there are a couple of major build supports we can talk about. So in general, one is you can get a Dante scaling build. So you get Dante from a cavern event, you add in a reasonable number of blights. It's actually, if you have Dante, getting the well, I guess it only counts with the expert challenge because you couldn't get it otherwise. But if you get Dante, adding additional blights to your deck is actually not necessarily a bad thing. He's certainly good. That event, or him and the event, are certainly good when you are going against Seraph the Diligent. But then on top of that, you buff him up, give him a large stone, damage stone, or buff cards to take advantage of his massive amount of multi-strike. The next is a Train Steward oriented build. These are very difficult to pull off effectively. It's mandatory that you get Advanced Prototype. That's the basic to make the build work. And then you either overstack all your Train Stewards onto a single floor, you buff their stats like crazy, or you can use Firelight. So Firelight Little Fade is one of the ways you can take advantage of Advanced Prototype. I showed that in one of my recent Expert Challenge guides. But yeah, so it's basically, if you happen to get Advanced Prototype, you can do a Train Steward build, but then you need to really think about how to take advantage of that artifact. How does it support other clans? A lot of different weird stuff. You have Pyre upgrades, which I've listed twice for some reason. You have coins, so there's coin generation out of events. You have damage shield you can get out of the shield card. You have AoE damage out of the sword card. You have Ember gain. You have the targeted kill and targeted daze, my yeet sticks that I always call. So it's a weird bag of random stuff you can get out of the clanless cards. But let's go ahead and start. Let's jump into the units, starting with the most basic, the Train Steward. Train Steward has no text. It's a 1 cost, 5 damage, 8 health unit. It is... I guess a good way is to benchmark all units against the Train Steward. Train Steward is the definitive average unit that I think all other units should be measured against. It has pretty weak stats, and it's incredibly difficult to make a Train Steward powerful, with the exception of exactly that specific build where you get Prototype and then you have ways to buff him. Outside of that, they're one of the first things you're going to want to get rid of out of your deck. Unless you have even worse cards in your deck. Given that, I think he fits as a C card, borderline C-, but I keep it as a C card. I think it's a good way to just say this is the average or the slightly below average unit. Although he gets a little bit of a buff because of Prototype becoming quite strong, and certainly early game they are what keep you alive through the first few fights. Under uncommon units, we have Spike Driver Colony. Spike Driver Colony has text: multi-strike 1, extinguish, add a permanent copy of this card to your discard pile. It is a 0 cost, 1 damage, 1 health unit that takes up 1 capacity. Spike Driver Colonies are certainly, especially when you first start thinking about them, a little bit complex. And if you don't know, in the Cavern event, hopefully you already know, the Cavern event is that you get 1 Spike Driver Colony, and then as soon as you have 4 of them in your deck, the next, after that battle where you get the 4th one, there will be an event which adds extra damage to the Spike Driver Colony. So how do you make Spike Driver Colonies work? The best way is to either stack them behind a tank and take advantage of their multi-strike, so you can give them extra damage, you can give them quick. They're going to already have base damage from the event. So after you've killed them off, ideally you kill them off when they already have buffs, but even if you don't, you kill them off, you buff them, you put them at the back, and they get blocked by a tank. The other way you can use them is with burnout builds. They tend to be really good units to reform because the multi-strike takes advantage of the reform buffs. They're also quite good chump blockers. So if you have if you get endless on them, you can keep putting them as chump blockers in front, and if they do survive, they do a decent damage, but otherwise they end up just being chump blockers. They can be useful for like harvest builds where you just need a lot of units that are dying all the time. But I think the best place for them is either in the back line, where they have at least something like 20 damage, 25 damage, multi-strike, and then they have blockers in front, or that you're reforming them a whole bunch, taking advantage of their multi-strike. Given that, I think they fit as a kind of B+ unit. They can be very weak before they've been upgraded, and until they have the event fulfilled, they also can be pretty weak. But it's not often that you get a unit that takes up 1 capacity that can have a huge amount of damage. You can also put Large Stone on them, although it's not necessarily that great because of the extra capacity they're taking up, but can also be very useful. Typically, you don't ever want them to tank. You want them more as kind of glass cannons that you put behind tanks to take advantage of their multi-strike. Next up, we have Dante. Dante the Deceptive. Dante the Deceptive has text: when played, gain a stack of multi-strike for each blight card in your deck. It is a 1 cost, 3 damage, 10 health unit. Some notes about Dante is on reform, he doesn't gain additional multi-strike. He no longer, I believe, gains summons effects because it's no longer considered as a summon effect, so he doesn't get it doubled if you have the double summon triggers. It also means that Transcend Imp no longer gets his effect when summoned if you play Dante and then play Transcend Imp. And when you get Dante, you get 3 Dante's Candles as part of the event. Those are 3 blights that are 1 cost blights that deal 3 damage to your pyre if you don't play them. Which, I mean, it's part of the thing. And you also get an artifact from him, which increases spell damage. So Dante can be a massive carry, especially if you get something like Large Stone on him, because that Large Stone damage and health will allow him to tank quite a lot and get him a lot of extra damage. Otherwise, you want just damage buffs on him. He's really good in decks that have Rage or damage buffs like from Awoken. He's also a decent Gorger. If you have a Gorge build or have a lot of morsel generation, he'll take advantage of all of those damage buffs and even the health buffs as well. Lifesteal is not so good on him, and he tends to be very weak against spikes because of his many multi-strikes. However, he does have serious carry potential, is a great unit to duplicate. And if you happen to get Dante, I mentioned this earlier, it can be really useful to duplicate deadweights, because then he'll get more multi-strike off of those deadweights. given his carry potential, I think he fits as an A unit. It doesn't mean you should always take him. As a card, he's an A. As an event, you really have to consider how important is draw and playing out cards in your deck. If you have a deck that requires you to churn through your deck quite rapidly, getting Dante can really hurt that in the long run. But as a base unit, he's very, very strong, and certainly is a unit that can carry you to victory. He's a great unit to duplicate, and he's a great unit if you have any type of buff decks at all. Certainly can become extremely powerful. Next, going into clanless spells. First we have Excavated Ember. So Excavated Embers you get through an event where you start with Calcified Embers. They are 3-cost deadweights that you can only play. You play it for 3 Ember, then you permanently purchase from your deck. If you don't purchase from your deck and you wait for 2 battles, those Calcified Embers will turn into Excavated Embers. Excavated Embers have text Consume, gain 2 Ember, draw 1. They are 0-cost spells. Excavated Embers are one of the easiest ways to get infinite combos. You can remove the consume from them, minus the cost from them, and then combine them with other cards. For example, you can get like an Awoken Rail Spike plus an Excavated Ember. The Excavated Ember is getting enough Ember and draw to then draw your Awoken's Rail Spike, which then draws a bunch of cards, including the Excavated Ember, which then draws the Awoken's Rail Spike, which then draws, and they can do this kind of infinite combo thing there, which can be really, really powerful. It's also an enabler for Ember Drain decks, and even outside of Ember Drain decks, it's a way to get advantage out of X-cost cards. It's a way to play really expensive units like Shadow Siege and Consumer of Crowns. It's a way to play a lot of high-cost cards in a single turn, and it's an incanter. In almost every case, I find that doing the event and having 2 turns or 2 rounds or 2 battles worth of deadweights is certainly worth the payoff, which is 3 Excavated Embers that get added into your deck. Given that, I think it's a very clear A card. I don't think it's S. There are some times when you don't necessarily want or get a lot of value out of the draw or the Ember cost. And even though it says draw, in reality, it's replacing itself. So you play this to get 2 Ember and a card that you would have drawn anyway. So you really play it for the Ember, for the incants, and for Ember Drain decks to get Ember once you've been Ember Drained. Still a fantastic card, and as I said, I think from an event perspective, I would even give this event an A. I think it's almost always worth it to take it and then get the Excavated Embers after. Next up is Automated Rail Spikes. Automated Rail Spikes has text deal 10x damage. It has a slay. Add a permanent copy of this card to your discard pile. Once you have 4 automatic Rail Spikes in your deck, they will all automatically upgrade to have a base damage. Automatic Rail Spikes was worse. This is actually one of the cards that got improved by the recent change with the last patch. The patch added that you can now put minus cost upgrades onto X cost cards, which is for automatic Rail Spikes is really good. That means you can do either 10 damage or plus 10 magic damage, or minus 1 cost creates also plus 10 damage. So it's very, very easy to get these to be something like 0 cost 30 damage spells or 0 cost. So yeah, 0 cost 30 damage spells, which are really, really strong. They are a little bit tricky because they do put a lot of garbage into your deck, and the ones when they're upgraded will consume, which is also kind of good because then you can play them and get them out of your deck. And they scale pretty well with Ember. If you have something like a way to generate like 3 or 4 Ember, it's quite a lot of damage, and it's targeted damage, which is significantly better. Given that, I think they still aren't incredibly powerful. They fit as a kind of strong card that's never going to be your carry, but can certainly be really strong. Just note that they can be very weak unless you've upgraded them with a minus cost or a plus 10 stone. I would almost never remove consume from them. I think it's actually better in almost every case that they're consuming. But having 0 cost targeted damage spells is rare and very, very powerful. Next up is Petty Theft. Petty Theft has text, deal 2 damage to an enemy unit, and on slay, gain plus 50 coins. It's a 1 cost spell. Petty Theft Petty Theft's value is kind of twofold. One of it is certainly having targeted damage. Not all clans have really good targeted damage. So this can be a way to get targeted damage. But really you're getting Petty Theft for the scaling you're getting from the coins. So you think about it, let's say you upgrade Petty Theft with the two best upgrades, which is a minus cost and a plus 10, or alternatively a plus 10 and a holdover. So let's say you get one of those two, or one of those two setups. So with the first setup, you spent 50 coins, and as long as this kills 3 units throughout the rest of your run, you've already made back and then some. Certainly 100 coins is a lot of value you can get out of the card. I would say most of the time though, it's pretty common you're getting at least 200 to 300 coins out of Petty Theft, and in some cases you can even get up to like 500, 600 coins. With the holdover, you have a base of, you've spent about 140 to 100, yeah, about 140 coins with the holdover plus the either plus 10 or minus cost. Then you have the opportunity cost because you've held it over, and that kind of offsets it a little bit. But if you get something like 500, 600 coins out of it, or even more than that, then you're certainly happy. That meant a lot of upgrades or a lot of relics or a lot of other opportunities you could use those coins for. As a baseline, without upgrading it at all, if you use it twice, it's been worth it, easily. So given how easy it is to get the value out of the card, I think it's quite good. I would give it as a baseline of an average card. Or even a strong card with the potential to become very powerful if you can take advantage of the coins and really get a lot of value out of it with relics, upgrades, and so on. One note, remove the card before Seraph. Unless you're going for high score, it's really, really bad against the Seraph fights. Unless you have no other way to kill backliners, then I guess you can keep it. But if you have other ways to do AoE or kill off backliners, get rid of Petty Theft. Just remove it because it's not going to add any more value. You can't take advantage of the coins anymore. Next up is Bone Rattler. Bone Rattler has text consume, apply plus 3x damage, or plus 3x damage to your pyre. This is one of the worst, it comes from one of the worst events in the game. At least I think it's one of the worst events. Maybe you guys differ. I don't think Bone Rattler is good. If I have this event, I'd never take Bone Rattler. The only case where it's going to be good is if you already have Blood for Blood. So you are gaining health from killing enemies with your pyre. Or you have, what is it called? I hate that my brain can't remember things. It's the, where enemies are dazed with the pyre and you get 1 free hit with the pyre. But even then, I still don't think it's that great. If you play it for 3 Ember, you're adding 9 damage to your pyre. That's typically not going to save your pyre. And it's certainly not going to scale your pyre up to where it's killing bosses. So I find this to be very, very ineffective, even with the first Hell Pact. I think it's still very weak. What I think it should be changed to, and this would be my recommendation, and this I think would be good, is add plus 3 damage to your pyre permanently. Yes, this could potentially be abused by infinite decks that generate infinite number of mana, or infinite number of Ember. But the most that it can be abused, and so also I would change it this way. I would make it not consume, I would make it purge, and I would make it plus 5x damage to your pyre. The most you could ever get out of it is one time, if you had unlimited Ember, you could have plus 500 damage to your pyre. But even having plus 500 damage to your pyre does not guarantee that you win the run, because enemies always attack first, and if you have a boss like Seraph getting to your pyre and hits you twice, you're basically dead in almost every case. So I think removing that one edge case, the most you're going to probably get out of this is just plus 9 permanent damage to your pyre, which is not bad for one card. And if you happen to be able to generate Ember, you get plus 5, then it's plus 25, or sorry, if it's plus 5 times, 5x, then it would be plus 15 damage to your pyre. Or if you have like 5 Ember, it's like plus 25 damage to your pyre. That's really good. That's on par with some of the other event cards. That would be my recommendation. I don't know if it needs to be plus 5x, but I think it needs to be Purge and plus X. And if you're super concerned about the Purge getting removed, then you just make it so that these events cannot happen at the same time, where you can't get both the Pyre buff event and the remove Purge event in the same run. So code it so that you can't get those two in the same run, and then I think you put Purge and make it permanent. That I think would actually be really good, and I would take it almost every time. Given how it is now, I think it's way too weak. I never take it. I think it's a bad card and needs to be reworked. Next up is Bone Shine. Bone Shine has text consume, restore 2x pyre health. Bone Shine, if I take either one, I will take Bone Shine because at least Bone Shine has something which persists across battles. So if you restore health to your pyre, now that additional pyre health will carry over into the future. I would still recommend the same change. I would have this be Purge and add 2x pyre health or even 3x pyre health. I think then it's much better. It's a one-time, you use it, you get a huge buff out of it, and then it goes away forever. And similar thing, the most you could ever get out of it is something like 200 pyre health. 200 pyre health is good, but it's not going to save you from huge bosses getting to your pyre and killing it. So, and that's if you somehow have a deck that's generating the maximum amount of Ember possible, 99 Ember. So I think you could rework this card to make it permanent and to be much better. But it's certainly better than the Bone Rattler. It's still not great, and I still almost never take it. I think it sits as a nice C- card where it's typically very weak, but occasionally you'll get a build where being able to heal your pyre ends up becoming very relevant, and then it's quite good. Especially builds that have a lot of draw. Then it's like, okay, yeah, you toss a Bone Shine out every once in a while just to get rid of it, maybe as an incant, and then it's fine. But outside of that, it tends to be not worth the draw, and I would not take it. Certainly you don't want to remove Consume from either of these cards either. Next up is Gift of Gratitude. Gift of Gratitude has text Purge, gain 40x coins. I think Gift of Gratitude, this is really interesting. So now with the changes, you could actually minus the cost of Gift of Gratitude, and you would earn back the money you invested in it, although you wouldn't get back the opportunity cost of minusing another card. So you have to like weigh that, but you could actually say, okay, if I have nothing else to minus cost of Gift of Gratitude, I get 40 coins for free. Or 15 coins net. Kind of funny. But it's actually, I take this more and more often now. I find one of the big issues with the other two options. One, you never typically have enough coins to take a value of the damage per coins effect. And the other, with Petty Theft, it's pretty bad later in the game. And it's always going to be something that takes up your draw. Where Gift of Gratitude, you can just play it once and be done with it, and it never shows up again. And I think that's quite good. You have a card that you play it for 1, it's 40, 2, it's 80, 3, it's 120. If you have the first Hell Pact, you get 120 baseline, which is pretty good. And just getting, you typically will find a turn when you draw Gift of Gratitude and you can afford to just dump all your Ember into it in that one turn and then never think about it again. And getting 120 coins is a lot. That's a full major upgrade on a spell or a unit, which is very powerful. It's also half the cost of a relic. So given how easy it is to play and then get rid of, and the value you get out of it, I think it fits as a solid A card. And in my feeling, it's more consistently good than Petty Theft. Petty Theft certainly can scale better, but I think Gift of Gratitude as a baseline is much stronger. And it's easier to just play it and be done with it. Most Blessed Sword. Most Blessed Sword has text Purge and Piercing. Deal 30x damage to enemy units, and it's an X cost card. This is another card that benefited quite a lot from the minus cost, because now you can make this a -1. So 30 damage, 0 cost spell that pierces and hits all enemies on the floor, which is much better than just adding damage to it. So adding 10 damage would be 10 piercing damage for the whole floor for 0. Now it's plus 30, so it's a pretty big buff onto the Most Blessed Sword. As well, what was I going to say about it? It's a really good card to have with the first Hell Pact, because then you get 90 damage AoE. It's okay to remove Consume on, as long as you have the Ember cost to play it every time. If you don't have the Ember cost, I wouldn't remove Consume from it. One of the big issues with the Blessed Sword, and this is true of all of the cards that come in that event, is basically they act as dead weights. Unless you're okay to have it play in Purge, then use it as a gap stop. were at a point in the game when you're struggling to finish a run. Maybe there's a particular boss battle that you can't kill the boss without using the Blessed Sword to kill off backliners or something like that. But if you can keep it, you should, to wait until it can consume. The problem is during that time you can't play it. So for basically two rings, you don't have a card, you have a dead weight. And that's pretty problematic. So you have to compare how good is it knowing I'm going to have to carry this card for 2 rings. Is it still worth taking? And I think Most Blessed Sword is the second best of the 3. Especially now with the minus cost. Before, I would say it was the worst of the 3, but now that there's the minus cost, you can make it a 30 damage purge piercing that consumes. I think that's really, really strong for 0. And with that buff, I think I put it as, so we put it as a B+. It's an average or strong effect, more on the strong side, but you have to consider it's weighed down by the 2 rings where it's just a dead weight. But it can be really, really powerful, and especially if you get upgrades on it, like minus cost, consume removal, or if you have the first Hell Pact, then it can be really, really insane. Next up is Thy Holiest Shield. This is another one from that same event. Has text Purge, apply 2x damage shield. Again, the Purge gets removed after 2 rings. This one, I would say, is not quite as good anymore. I used to consider it better. It's certainly better in certain builds where you already stack damage shield, builds where you have the need to just be able to play something to block and protect a unit, even oftentimes a backline unit. So this is a really good card to put with Tethys builds, because what you do is you don't put it on the frontliner, you put it on Tethys. The frontliner takes damage the whole game, or the whole rest of the round, but then you have that damage shield on Tethys to protect it against the boss fights. The other thing with Holiest Shield is it does take benefit from the -1. I don't think it's as quite as strong as a -1. Better for me is the Holiest Shield getting double stack and then -1 cost, because then you can, for 3 Ember, get 6 damage shield on a unit, which is pretty good. And again, the same question, how good is it after having held it over for a couple of turns? And I would say it's pretty good. It's not as good as the Most Blessed Sword. So given that it's slightly worse than the Most Blessed Sword, I think it fits really nicely as a B card. So certainly I don't think can get quite as strong. It can get pretty nuts. You can get something like, insane amounts of damage shield on it, but I think it's much harder to pull off than getting the value out of the Most Blessed Sword with the recent changes. But yeah, my go-to would be double stack, -1 cost, and then you can get a huge burst of damage shield out of it. Next up is Petrified Skull. Petrified Skull has text Purge, kill a non-boss unit. So it's a targeted non-boss unit killer. I think this is the most consistent out of the 3 of them. And I think it is the most useful as a Purge card as well. So the other ones, they may help with like a specific moment, but you're almost always going to have that time where like you have one unit that just gets through and is going to do a huge amount of damage to your pyre, or is going to kill your units, like a sweep unit is going to kill your backline, and you can just Petrified Skull it out. I typically always permafrost it so that you can have it in hand for that moment when you want to kill something. And it's also a really good consume removal card. So you can, say if you permafrost and consume remove, it's a 1 cost kill any unit that's not a boss unit, which can be incredibly powerful in certain builds. It's probably the one I take the most when I have that event, because I think it's the easiest to just play and use and get advantage of. Given that it fits as a card, I think it's, again, the best of the 3, and you rarely ever are disappointed in the result, because you can pick whatever unit you want. So you can pick an armor unit if you just want to get it out of the way. You can pick a damage unit if it's killing your backline. You can pick a backline unit where there's a boss in front. So there's a lot of, it's pretty versatile. You can also use it, this is actually something different than the other 2, you can use it to kill off your own units. So if you remove Consume, and let's say you have a Little Fade deck with Firelight, you can just kill Firelight. It's a guaranteed kill Little Fade, which I've done before, or kill Bounty Stalker, or kill whatever other unit you want to reform and bring back. Maybe it's a Burn Bright Rector Flicker or something. So it has versatility in that you can kill any unit, it's targeted, and it's cheap, right? 0 cost to be able to do that. So I think it's the best of the 3. It's the one I take most often, but sometimes you might want to take the other 2, given the build you might have set up. If you have something like a lot of damage shield, or you need something that's going to do a good AoE damage. Next up is Trap Shoot. Trap Shoot has text, consume, descend a unit to the bottom floor, apply daze 2. It's a 0 cost spell. Trap Shoot is what I used to take when I first started playing Monster Train. Since then, I've kind of switched over. I will occasionally take Trap Shoot, but the biggest problem is it's kind of like a... so it's better and worse than the alternative, which we'll get to in the next. It's better because you can apply this to bosses. Anything that descends, you can apply it to the boss and apply daze to it. That's pretty good. And if you double stack it, you can get 4 days onto the boss. The problem is the opportunity cost. You've had to have drawn this card probably several times, and unless you have permafrost on it, it's been clogging up your draws. So you don't typically want to play it as a way to like just daze a boss. And 0 cost for 2 days is pretty good. So you could also just use it on a unit to daze that unit. But it does kind of, in a lot of ways, if you play it to actually use the descend, if you're putting it on your own units, you daze that unit for 2 turns, which might be okay depending on the unit. And if you've done it on an enemy unit, it's kind of like you've delayed the problem. So unless you have a way to immediately kill the unit, you've just delayed the problem to another day. It's not bad. It's certainly a good card, but I think it's not quite as good as the other alternative card. But you can use it. You have different varieties of ways you can use it. So you can use it to stun bosses. You can use it to bring units down on the enemy side and daze them. You can use it to just daze an enemy, or you can use it to bring your own units and overstack a floor. Although I will note that this one is always the bottom floor, so you don't have the flexibility of saying I want to stack up a middle floor. You can't use Trap Shoot to do that. But the other problem with Trap Shoot is that the daze is not long enough to get them into the pyre to be dazed, which is really kind of what you want with a lot of the daze cards, is to have them dazed all the way through up to the pyre. Not in every case. Sometimes you just want it for that one floor, but there are other cards that do that, I think, better. Given that, I think it's a solid B+ card. At worst, it's an average effect, but it has the opportunity to be really good. If you double stack it, get permafrost on it, it's a 1 cost, daze a boss for 4 turns, which is really strong. And Steel Pulley. Steel Pulley is one of the other Yeet sticks. It has text consume. Ascend an enemy unit to the pyre room, apply dazed 3. It's a 2 cost spell. This is like a get rid of the problem right away card. So it's really good at being used on tanks, like armor units that are just blocking the rest of the floor. You can use it on backliners to get them out and get their damage away. You can use it on seraphs or flying bosses during their flying phase. If you double stack it, you can use it to get 6 days on them before they're going to do their attack run. You can't use it after that, though, because then you ascend them directly to the pyre and they'll kill you. But before that, you can use it. You can't use it to ascend your own units. Oh, no, you can't, because it's enemy units only. So you can't use this to ascend enemy units. Sorry, I was mistaken there. You can also just double stack it to add 6 days to any unit that you want. And in some cases, you may want to do that. I don't always remove consume from this, but it can work if you want to repeatedly use it on flying bosses, or if you want to just have like a permanent 3 cost Yeet stick, or if you just have a lot of Ember and you don't care. Removing consume can also be very powerful with this one as well. It can also work on units that are already in the pyre floor. So if you combine it with something like Siren Song, you can get 6 days on a unit that's already up there, which is can be relevant. But I typically just use it as a get rid of a unit. Just get it out, prevent damage, make sure I'm killing every unit, get rid of a backliner, get rid of or add days to a flying boss. And that, I think it's quite good. I think it's still also a B+, but if you compare the two, I think Polyclaw is more relevant in most decks, but I don't think it has quite the days on boss power that Trap Shoot does. Trap Shoot does. So they both have different purposes a little bit. I think Steel Pulley is better at just getting units away and getting rid of them. Trap Shoot is better for bosses and also helps to overstack floors for your own side. And last but not least, we have Bone Dog's Favor. Bone Dog's Favor has text unplayable, reserve, restore 5 pyre health. Bone Dog's Favor is mostly renowned for its rarity, its pure rarity in getting it. I think I've seen it 5 times in the wild in all the time I played Monster Train. And I've won 3 out of those 5, probably. But it's a pretty good card in certain decks. The nice thing about it is it's actually decent if you get Permafrost on it. It's basically what that means is you lose 1 draw for 1 turn in order to permanently heal your Pyre 5 health each turn, which is not a bad trade. Without Permafrost, it's pretty weak. Like I would say, actually pretty weak, because then it's a draw on draw, heal your Pyre 5, or if you don't play it, heal your Pyre 5, which is not particularly great. But with Permafrost, I actually think it's quite good. It's a way to just permanently heal up your Pyre while you're doing all your other stuff with all your cards. Given that, I think it fits as a kind of a B- card. It's a weak card that can become average or strong when you add Permafrost to it as a way to just keep your Pyre health nice and topped. It's especially good in builds where you leak units but are not ever having issues with relentless fights. So, and there are a lot of builds that end up that way, where they leak a lot of the high health units, they damage your Pyre, then you just die to the units, but you're fine against the relentless fights. So this is a good card for that. But honestly, you take Bone Dog's Favor primarily just to get it golden and then get it out. All right, so that's all the cards. Here is the summary. Again, 4 A cards, several different B cards, Train Steward and Bone Shine being the C cards, and then Bone Rattler being the D cards. And the biggest thing that I would note is just that all these come with events that have different effects. And I'll be reviewing the artifacts as well, so you can kind of then combine events to see, anyway, a kind of overall impression of events. I don't think I'm going to do an event review because that's a little bit hard to put together, but at least you can get an idea about how I feel about the Clanless cards and how I would use them. And yeah, summary is most Clanless cards are pretty good. In general, they're, I would say, higher quality than a lot of the clan cards, which is to be expected because they're incredibly rare, with a couple of exceptions. Now, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's go into updates, starting with Hellhorned. So we're going to go through what are my thoughts, why I've maybe changed some of them. I've also applied the minus and plus setup to every single one of the clans. So I'm not going to cover every single change. I'm going to cover changes when a full letter grade change was applied. I'm not going to cover it if it went from a B to a B plus or a B to a B minus or so on. But you will see that in the overview. So, starting with uncommon cards, Railbeater so Railbeater's also here because of the buff that came through the recent patch. It went from 25 armor to 30 armor. However, even with the buff, the same issues still apply. I think it's still a very average unit, so I'm keeping it at a C. And I should mention I will be covering all of the changes, even if they don't change a letter grade, just to explain what I think about the change. I don't think it was enough to push it into a B range. And I don't think this is a C plus card. It's very, very hard to take advantage of Railbeater. I think it fits nicely, just like an average card, a little above average card, maybe. Transcendent, on reflection, and this will also come up several different times throughout these updates. Rare cards have this special position of being cards that you never get in your deck by accident. Given that these are always cards that you're choosing to add, I have increased a lot of the ratings for the rare cards based on that you already know pretty well what kind of deck you have before you get the rare card. Given that, I actually think Transcendent is an A card. In a deck that doesn't have imps, he's awful. But you're not taking Transcendent in decks where you don't have imps. You're only taking Transcendent as a draft pick when you know whether you have imps. Given that you can only get him after you've seen how your deck is for the first few rounds, I think he's significantly better. In decks where you take him because you have imps, he's incredibly powerful and can carry your deck. Given that, I think he deserves a buff. I think he was previously B or B plus. We've just buffed him up from that to an A grade. Next up is Hornbreak. Hornbreak I missed entirely actually in my first review. So this is actually the first review of Hornbreak. Hornbreak has text, piercing, deal 5 damage. It's a 1-cost spell. It's a objectively better torch in every way except for scaling your own Hornbreaker Prince. That's the only time when torch is better. But in all other cases, Hornbreak is better. Doesn't mean it's necessarily a great card. I think it's an okay card. It's an average card or even a borderline weak card in some circumstances. But it's very easy to get its plus 10 damage. And then it's a really decent card. It's 15 damage piercing, which is enough to kill almost every armored unit. I think it actually is enough to kill every armored unit and every backliner. So given how easy it is to make it a pretty powerful card, I think it fits really nicely as a C+. It's weak before you upgrade it. Even I would say probably it's more like it's average before you upgrade it and then become strong. It's never going to carry your deck. Killing off armored units and killing off backliners is not carry potential, but it certainly isn't bad. And once you've gotten plus 10 on it, that's about what you ever want to do. Maybe plus 10 and -1 if you're desperate for Ember. Then it's a strong card. It's like a B card. So I think it's a card that starts off pretty average or weak, and then it can become strong with a simple upgrade. Oh. Next up is Impelate. Impelate's one of those that is getting buffed due to its rarity. Impelate is actually really good in imp decks. If you have something like 4 imps, that's 90 damage for 1 to a front enemy unit. Nothing does that much damage for 1 cost without significant upgrades to the card. It's a very good card to put -1 to, so it's then a 0 cost, whatever damage you have. I'd say 4 imps is the minimum before I would take it. If you have 4 imps, which if you take this, you probably have 4 imps, it's amazing. 90 damage easily. If you have Imp Parade, it's nuts because it scales infinitely. So this is one that I'm buffing specifically because it's rare. Some of the others, like for example Important Work, I'm not going to buff because you can get it as a starter card. And as a starter card, it can be really bad if you don't have imps. Impelate is rare. You can only get it by choosing it, and you should only choose it if you have, and I say, minimum 4 imps. Then it's really strong. At 3 imps, sorry, not doing 90, it's doing 4 imps does 60 damage. At 3 imps, it's doing 45 damage. I don't think that's quite enough to get it up to where you need it. I think it needs to be at least 60 damage to take value out of it. Otherwise, you need to upgrade it to make it better. Given that, I think it's a solid B card. It can potentially be powerful if you specifically have spell weakness, you have holdover, and I've done a deck like this, and you have a lot of imps, then it can be really powerful and actually kill bosses. But for the most part, it acts as a clear a front enemy unit, which is a strong effect, consistently strong effect. So I think it fits, definitely deserving of a buff given the rarity of the card. Last Stand as well is, I'm buffing it up due to its rarity. Again, you don't take it if you don't have Rage, but if you have Rage, it's insane. If you even have just a few Rage imps, or if you have at least something like you're getting 10 Rage on a unit, Last Stand makes it much, much better because the Rage lasts longer and it's more potent. It's a fantastic card to put Permafrost on, and I think given that you're only going to take this in cases where you already have Rage in place, I think it's an A card. It's when you have Rage, it's always strong and can be extremely powerful. So given that, again, we're bumping it up from, I think it was a C+, maybe it was even a B- or a B card. We're bumping it up to an A. Reinforce, same story. I don't think it's as scalable as Last Stand, sorry. But I think it still benefits from the fact that you're only going to take it in cases where you know you can increase or double the armor effectively. It's not an A card, but I think it fits nicely as a B card. It got bumped up from a C card. I think it's a strong effect. You can get it to scale infinitely, but scaling infinite armor does not equate to surviving the run. Because if you're not killing units, even if you have all the armor in the world, if you have no way to kill units, you can still die. So I don't think it can be a real carry card by itself, but it certainly can be a very strong card, and you would only take it in cases where it's going to be strong. So this is now the new summary. Again, I've put plus and minuses. A lot of stuff that got pluses are the imps. A lot of them have the potential to be very powerful, so I bumped them all up from like B to B plus or C to C plus. There's a couple of exceptions there, but for the most part, those got small buffs. And then Consumer of Crowns, Alpha Fiend, I bumped up from a C to a C plus. Hidden Passage from a B to a B plus. I don't think it's an A, but I think it has the potential to be really, really strong if you're using it to overstack floors. Imp in a Box got C plus from a C. Important Work got bumped to a C plus. Impressive got bumped to a C plus because of their power potential. And it's pretty easy to take advantage of that. You just need imps to take advantage of it. But I'm still keeping them in the C range because they are dead cards, and you can start with them in your deck. Battering Ram got that. Inferno got that. Spike of the Hellhorned I still think is a C. One Horn's Tome also got a plus because there are certain decks that can take advantage of the multi-strike and aren't concerned about the fragile. And that's it. Summary for Hellhorned. Moving on. Awoken updates. Starting with Husk Hermit. Very minor buff. I just have been playing around and I've been using Husk Hermit a little bit more. And it turns out the 30 health actually is a lot. And I think it's a quite easy card to make a tank. So I'm buffing it from a C card to a B minus card. I don't think it can ever be a carry, but I think it's better than a C grade card, which is what I gave it before. So we're bumping it up a little bit. Not quite a full letter grade, but almost a full letter grade due to its tankiness, which I've in recent runs been finding very valuable. Thorn Hollow. Thorn Hollow I overrated. I think it's due to my history using the card. As a standalone unit without any other support, it's a 5/15, which is a pretty weak unit. I still think it's very easy to take advantage of Thorn Hollow and make it quite strong, but I don't think it's worth an A. I'm bumping it down from an A to a B plus. So it's an average unit that can become really powerful with the right setup. So you just need healing or you need ways to give extra health. Then it becomes extremely powerful. Regen is obviously very, very good on Thorn Hollow. Next up is Shard Channeler. I think Shard Channeler as a rare card, you're only going to get it from rare drafts, and you're only going to take it when you have spikes, and then all you need to do is slap on some form of health onto it, and then it's going to survive pretty easily. A 25 health onto a Shard Channeler keeps it around for almost all the rest of the fights, and being able to double your spikes damage, effectively double your spike damage, is really, really powerful. Given that I think it also fits as a B+, it's an for when you have not a lot of spikes, but just a little bit of spikes, it can get you over that threshold of 10 where you're killing backliners. And in decks where you have insane amounts of spikes, like a Sentient spike deck, then you can get 80 spikes or even more out of Shard Channeler, and then it's really, really powerful. So this got updated from a C to a B+. And again, due to its rarity. Wilting Sapwood, I am going to very, very slightly buff from a D to a C-. There are some specific cases where you can take advantage of the 1 Ember cost, but I still think it's too expensive and takes up too much space. And I think changing one of those would bump up this card from a C- to a C+. The fact that it's so expensive and that it takes up so much space is what brings it down for me. Steel Enhancer. Steel Enhancer, I think I rated too poorly. It was a C card. I think this fits much better as an average card that can become really strong with the right build setup. Given that, I think it fits as a kind of B- card. I don't think it's ever going to be a carry card. It's not. You have to have a lot of other things to make the Steel Enhance effect work well. I still think that applications of this should somehow be able to be increased, but as it is, it's fine. But I think it fits nicely as a B- card. It had it as a C before. Then we have Vine Grasp. Vine Grasp, I think I also trashed it a little too much. I think it has certainly potential to be a very strong card. You just add 10 to this, and it's very similar to like, what did we talk about earlier? The Hellhorned. Man, why is my brain not able to remember things very well? Apologize about that. It's a 13 damage card that's going to kill most backliners. Even if you don't upgrade it, 3 damage is not awful. So I think it gets bumped also up to a B- card. It's a card that by itself is average, or even potentially weak, but it's very easy to make it strong just by adding 10 damage to it, and then suddenly it's a 13 damage card that can kill any backliner. And targeted backline damage can be very relevant for a lot of decks, especially against Seraph, where a lot of the heavy damage comes from the backline. Glimmer. Glimmer also was a card that I was saying it was a C+ card, but I think it's even better than a C+ card. I think it's a solid B card. Should have rated it that way in the beginning. The relevance of having 2 AoE from the first 4 rings is you can't negate that benefit. That kills almost every backliner easily, and you get restore triggers anytime there's a restore trigger, and you can heal your own units. If you add +10 to it, you can take it through the rest of the game, because that's a backline 10 damage and it clears the whole floor. Given that, I think it fits as a solid B card. I'm bumping it up from what was effectively a C+ to a B, because it's so easy to just add 10 damage to it. So I think I was wrong in how I rated it before. It's more powerful than I had given it credit. Preserve Thorns got nerfed. It was 0 cost, now it's 1 cost. Given the nerf, I don't think it stays as an A. I think it's still very powerful, but you can't then consume remove and then make it a 0 cost again. It's still 4 incants in 1. It's still 30 damage for 1, and it's still 3 draw, but I think it's still now a B+. The 0 was really what just made this card over the top. Adding 1 just knocks it just down to where it's a strong card, or even an average card that with -1 cost becomes an A card again. So it's an investment of 25 coins to get the same effect, but I think it's worth that it's not now an auto pick in every case. I don't know why the plus came up first. Razor Sharp Edge. We'll go all the way to the grade. So Razor Sharp Edge is text, apply +10 damage and -2 max health. I had missed this when I did the Awoken review. I think Razor Sharp Edge is really good. You can already see it's a B+. I think it's much better than Steel Enhancer because you get a much better effect on the units where you typically need it. So you typically use Razor Sharp Edge to get damage on a unit that has Trample or that a unit that has Multi-Strike. And having +10 is a lot better than having +3. The -2 max health also is less relevant because you're typically wanting to buff units that do damage, and you don't care so much if they have a little bit less tankiness in most cases. The exception is the Animus of Will, but take advantage of this. All you need to do is add plus some health on Animus of Will, and suddenly you can play Razor Sharp Edge on it. The other nice thing about Razor Sharp Edge is it can be used to kill off backliners that have 2 or less health. So you can use it offensively to kill off units, or you can use it on your own side to support your own units. So it has a little bit of versatility, and that versatility got improved recently because now it is, even though it's -2 max health, I think actually it's changed back to -2 heart, which means that it applies also to current health. So if you have a unit that is damaged in the back line and it has 2 or less current health, you can kill it with Razor Sharp Edge, which you used to not be able to do. So given all that, I think it's at worst an average or above average card that can become very strong in certain decks where you have a lot of multi-strike and have the health to afford the negative effect of the max health. Unleash the Wildwood. Unleash the Wildwood, I oversold. It's certainly a very good card, and I'm going to keep it at an A grade because I think it's a strong card in almost every deck. But realizing that it doesn't carry as often as I was selling it to be. Meaning it's not a card that will make your deck get to, get through an entire run. Because it doesn't help with relentless combat. That's the one weakness of Unleash the Wildwood is compared to like regen or armor, is using Unleash the Wildwood, unless you have a huge health deficit and it's bumping you all the way back up to that health, it's not really going to be the card that saves you during relentless combat with flying bosses. Given that, I've brought it down a little bit back to an A grade. I still think it's very strong, but I don't think it fits the S where S cards really should be always powerful all the time. Okay, so now here is your summary of all the Awoken cards. Some of the cards got pluses and minuses. You'll see that with things like Animus of Will and Awoken Hollow, which got pluses, Shattered Shell, because they have a lot of carry potential if you have the right decks for them. Let's see, what else? Engraft got a plus, Sting got a plus, Edge Prior got a plus, and then you'll see a lot of the spells actually are on that plus edge because they have the potential to become really powerful, but they're incredibly weak But where we have pluses are ones that I find are much easier to take advantage of than the ones that have minuses or are flat C's or B's. Pyre Shard is unchanged. I think Pyre Shards needs to be buffed. I think it's too weak. Okay, now let's get into Stygian Guard. So Stygian Guard, Mollusk Mage got updated. It's now text +8 magic power from +7, and it has 5 damage and 3 health versus 7 damage and 1 health. I don't think this effectively changes Mollusk Mage. I think it's still a C+ card. It can be okay, and the 1 magic power, I guess, can be relevant for some cases, but I think it's not. It's like very edge where that becomes relevant. The 3 health is what's more relevant. It means that it won't die instantly to 2 damage or 1 damage. But it still needs a lot of support to be good, and it only fits decks where you're taking advantage of the power. The fact that you can start with it and not have any damage, damage spells is really bad. So it sits as a nice C+ card. Cuddle Hex also got buffed. It went from a 5-3 or 5-2 to a 5-3. Same grade, still sits as a C. Hasn't changed. It's an average card, and if you can take advantage of the Frozen, great, but you need a lot of other things to really take advantage of Frozen. Icy Silophyte, sorry, the minus came up early. I bumped it up from a C to a B-. I still think spell weakness is, you have to have a build that takes advantage of the spell weakness, but the fact that you can just slap a +10 on it and then it's a pretty solid sweep unit is pretty good. So I don't want to negate that at all. I think it's a card that you need to upgrade it. You need to put damage on it, especially. Likely you need to put health on it as well. It's a great card with Large Stone. But I think as a base, it's still weak. It needs a buff, or you need to be able to take advantage of the spell weakness to make it work. Unnamed Tome. Some reason I missed Unnamed Tome last time. Has text Permafrost, Consume, Apply Silence to enemy units. It's a 0-cost card. It's like mandatory against Seraph the Patient. You just take it because it will automatically silence all of the growth effects of Seraph the Patient, which is insane. It's also very good against Seraph the Diligent because you can silence the units that are putting garbage in your deck. It's also pretty good against... trying to think what else. It's pretty good against the 7th floor boss, the one that grows. I can't think of the name of him, but grows every time you damage it. You can silence that growth so it doesn't happen. So in general, it's a pretty good card. But if you don't need those effects, then it's just a deadweight. It's a 0-cost deadweight, but it's a deadweight nonetheless. I think it fits as a nice C+ card. It's a weak card, but in specific circumstances, it's really, really good. And it's an auto pick against Seraph the Patient. Next, we have Harness the Titan. I think Harness the Titan benefits from its rare tag because you're not going to start with it, meaning you're not going to get it and then have no cards you can upgrade the damage on, or magic power on, I should say. Given that, I think it's a little bit better than I graded it. I traditionally put it as a C. I think it's a solid B card. It's a card, when you take it, you already have spells that will take advantage of it. Otherwise, you wouldn't take it. And and given that, I think it deserves to be buffed a little bit. It's never going to be, for me, the big carry, though. I think there are better big carries than Harness the Titan, but I think it's a solid all-around card. And especially the fact that it's rare means you're only going to get it from rare drafts. You're only going to take it when you have magic power effective cards. Ice and Pyre got a buff due to the fact that it's rare. Not a buff, I should say. I bumped it up because it's a rare card. I had it as a C+. I think it deserves to be as a B+. You'll take this when you can take advantage of it. It's fantastic in floors where you incant on the top floor. It's fantastic in spell damage floors with spell weakness because it's a 90 base. It's very easy to make this more than 190 damage. And then you can blast bosses that have spell weakness on them for a huge amount of damage. So I think it also benefits from its rare tag. And I think Monster Train is one of those cards where normally you would say a rare thing is actually a negative, but I think in Monster Train it's a positive because rare means I will never get this by accident. I will always pick this card. And the fact that you can always pick the card means that you'll only take it when it's relevant. And I think that's worthy of giving bumps to a lot of these cards. Siren Song is exactly the same. The fact that you only take it when you need it buffs it up. What makes Siren Song a little bit less good is it doesn't really work so well against bosses because you don't typically want to toss a boss up to the top floor and give it 3 days. So that's the one case where it's kind of bad, but I still think it's a very good card if you can take advantage of it. And the fact that it's rare means you're only going to take it if you can take advantage of it, or should only take it when you can take advantage of it. Deep Offering's the same. Bump it up from a C to a B for the same reasons. In cards where you can take advantage of the discard and the draw, it's amazing, and that's when you should take it. You don't just typically take it into any deck. 2 cards for 5 draw is okay, but oftentimes then you can't afford to play the other cards. So I think it's useful in decks that take advantage of the draw or have a lot of Ember, or have a way to take advantage of the of the discard. And in that case, I would almost always put Permafrost on it, and you wait for like your offering cards to stack up, and then you blast a whole bunch of offering cards at once with Deep Offering, doing a huge effect in one turn. Ancient Synergy, same thing. You would never get this by accident, and given that you're only going to take it in cards where you have a lot of spells already, then it's amazingly strong. I think it fits as an A card. If you take it because you have enough spells, and enough spells for me means something like, I don't know, 8 or 9 spells minimum, it's really strong, and it's really, really good. So we bumped this up from a C+ to an A, strictly because when you take it, you should have a lot of spells, and when you take it then, it's incredibly powerful. It's one of the best ways to clear an entire floor that has spell weakness as well. So it's at worst, strong card that becomes very powerful, as long as you're choosing it in decks when you take advantage of having a lot of spells in your deck. Gifts for a Guard is another one that I just completely missed. It has text, draw 3 spells and apply Consume, plus 20 magic power and 0 Ember. This is a fantastic card for spell weakness decks. It's also a fantastic way to just scale up damage. So what you do is you put Consume onto a damage card, something like what we just saw, the Ancient Synergy, or you put it on Ice Storm, or put it on Ice Tornado. You put it on anything that has a tuned on it, so an Ice Empire, something like that. And you put Consume, or you put plus 20 damage in Consume, and then you get Consume removal, and then you can infinitely scale up that spell with plus 20 magic damage, plus 20 magic damage, plus 20 magic damage, and 0 Ember cost. And even if you don't do that, if you just play it straight, it's draw 3 spells that will be able to be played, they consume, and they have plus 20 magic power, which is almost always good. Like, through most of the runs. I mean, maybe during Seraph it could be a little bit dodgy because you can get rid of some spells you might need later, but that's pretty rare. I think in general, the worst effect is that it's a strong effect or an average effect, but it can become incredibly powerful with these decks that just scale up magic damage. Given that, I think it fits really nicely as a B+ card. It's an worst case average card that can become really powerful with the right deck setup. And the fact that it's rare means you're only going to take it when you think you can get that setup effectively. So you've already added consume damage and then consume removal, or you think you will be able to do that throughout the rest of the run. And Hoarfrost Effigy is another one that just benefits from the fact that you only take it when you need it. If you have a lot of Frostbite and it's consistent Frostbite, you take Hoarfrost Effigy, and it just makes it much easier to kill flying bosses and other bosses and even other units. In that case, then I give it a B+. It's an average effect for most of the battles, but can become extremely powerful against flying bosses where you can have the effect hit multiple times. And given all of those changes, here's the new overview. We have Ancient Synergy moving into A. We have a lot of cards getting pluses and minuses, which they didn't have before. So Guard of the Unnamed got plussed. Colcilia still is a flat C. Isosilophyte is a C-. I think they need significant investment in terms of upgrades to become good, but they can become very strong with those upgrades. Nameless Siren got a plus. Offering Monument got a plus. A lot of stuff. Flash Freeze, Offering Token, Crypt Builder, Ice Empire, we moved up. And then a lot of things are still staying in their same range without much change. And Frozen Lance is still garbage. Okay, Stygian Guard is done. Let's go into Umbra. Umbra doesn't have that much updates, but there are some changes due to the patch. Perils of Production added +1 Rage, so now it's apply 3 Rage rather than 2 Rage. I don't think it changes at all the grade. I think it fits still nicely as a B+ card, and you're happy you get +1 Rage from it. But the Rage wasn't why you were playing Perils of Production most of the time. Most of the time you were playing it for the Ember. But now the fact that the rage will scale a little bit better does make it a little bit better. And there is actually now a case for double stacking it. Rage 6 is okay for 1 cost or effectively 2 cost. The only issue is that you typically pay Perils of Production in ways to generate the Ember without having to deal with the Ember Drain, and there the rage doesn't really become that relevant. Shroud Spike. I'm giving Shroud Spike the rare card buff. So Shroud Spike I had as a C+. Or I think I had it as a B+. I'm going to bump it all the way to an A. This is also one of the cards that takes advantage of the change to X cost. The fact that you can -1 to this, and you can start from 0 cost, Gorge a Morsel 2 times, is really, really good. And that you can remove Consume from it and get it back down to net 0 again is insane. That means that you can always have Shroud Spike and always play it for 1 and Gorge 2 times. That's really, really strong. So I think now it buffs up to an A. It's rare that you can't take advantage of this. Even just getting -1 cost to it means you have a 0 cost Gorge, which is going to be good every time. I think the best combo now is -1 and Permafrost, or Consume Remove and -1. But yeah, I think it deserves getting buffed. And the fact, again, that it's rare, you're only going to take it when you can take advantage of it. Retch, I'm buffing due to the rarity. You're only going to take Retch when you can take advantage of it. And when you take advantage of it, you can really go crazy. It's fantastic in Primordium builds, and it's really good in builds where you have a lot of morsels up front and then lose them over time. So I have buffed this up to a B from a C. I still think it has the possibility of over-morseling your deck. And the problem is that even if you play morsels into other floors, they don't get consumed necessarily. And I keep finding times when I have Retch and it just doesn't perform at the level that I want. But I still think it's better than the C+ I gave it. I think it fits nicely as a B card. B+ card. Oh, just kidding. Gave it a B+. Yeah, that's right, because it can become insane if you get it with Feast, or if you have enough room to play a lot of morsels, then it becomes really good. Furnace Tap got changed. They removed the Rage. I don't think you were playing Furnace Tap for the Rage. It is a nerf to it, but I still think it's an S card. Being able to apply Multi-Strike for 2 is so strong. Even without the Rage, I think it's still an S card. Yeah, and not much more to say about it. It's definitely weaker, but I still think in the cases where you're taking Furnace Tap, and Furnace Tap also is a rare card, so you're only going to take it when you can take advantage of it. And I would almost still auto-pick it. I think it's still too good. Not too good. I think it's still incredibly powerful. But yeah, it does, in those cases where you wanted the Rage and the Multi-Strike, it is a little bit of a nerf. It's offset slightly by the fact that Furnace, or that Perils of Production has more Rage. But yeah, I think it's still, you weren't playing this for the Rage, you were playing it for the Multi-Strike. So now we have the overview. Not a whole lot has changed, just the changes that I mentioned. Otherwise, it's exactly the same as during the last review. And finally, Melting Remnant updates. So Melting Remnant had quite a few changes with the recent patch. So we'll go through those, starting with Hallowed Drippings. Hallowed Drippings changed from apply 3 burnout to friendly units to apply 5 burnout to friendly units. That's actually really big. It's big in 2 ways. One, 5 burnout's already way better than 3 burnout. The other is that it's now actually worth double stacking, because getting 10 burnout on a unit is enough for almost the rest of the Relentless fight, or for Relentless fights, or for the rest of the battle. So this is now a candidate to do consume removal, or not consume removal, to do double stack and minus cost. Getting 10 burnout onto a unit basically keeps it around for the rest of the run. The only issue then is making sure that it stays alive. But I think it's a significant enough buff that I'm moving it up to a B grade from a C. I think it was a C flat or C+. Now it's a B with the buffs. Burnout 5 is a lot better than Burnout 3, and then you just get rid of the card. Oh, B minus. My minuses keep coming up later. Sorry about that. So it went from I think a C to a B minus. So still not amazing, but I think it's a significant buff, and it's certainly worth considering removing or double stacking and minusing the cost of, or even removing consume and then having it on if you need a lot of burnout onto units. Purifying Cleanse got buffed. It now restores 15 rather than 10 health and applies 3 burnout. I think this also got buffed up. Let's see if it okay, it's a flat B. Yeah, I don't think it's as good as Wicklash still. I think Wicklash is still better because Wicklash carries across deaths, whereas Purifying Cleanse does not. But the buff does make it a little bit more consistent in keeping your units alive. On the negative side, it also means that your unit Doesn't die as quickly if you just apply burnout to it, but okay. I think the offset of having an extra turn and the 5 health offsets the, oh crap, my imp takes 1 more turn to die because I want it to die, and I apply burnout to it. So that gets an overall buff, putting it from a C+ to a B. And Wicklash got buffed. Went from +5 damage to +10 damage. The burnout's the same. So that gets the best of the burnout applicators because, again, this carries over, and I think the +10 is certainly quite a big buff. I still don't think it's an A because you can't take it in a lot of cases when you don't need the burnout. And if you're putting burnout on a unit that you don't want it on, that's pretty bad. But I still think it stays as a B+. And for those times when you can use it, it's now even more powerful. Okay, so then looking at the clan as a whole, not much has changed. We did move Purifying Cleanse and Hallow Drippings up. Wicklash did not change. And I don't think there was anything else that changed. I think that's it. I think I kept everything else where it was. So, yes. So with that, that is all of the cards reviewed. And next up will be the champion review and the artifact review. Just so you're aware, in the description, I now have a spreadsheet tracking all of the cards, their ratings, descriptions, and so on. So if you want to use that as a quick reference, feel free. It's a Google spreadsheet. I will maintain it through all the patches. So every time we get patches, I will then update, put out a new patch video, and explain how it's affected the ratings, and try to keep that up to date. So hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys have been enjoying the series. Appreciate all the support. It's really been nice to get all the comments and the discussions, disagreements, and so on. Hopefully, you guys have gotten a lot of value out of this series. And yeah, with that, thanks for watching. If you did like it and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. It helps me out in getting closer and closer to qualifying as a YouTube partner. And if you have subscribed, appreciate your support already. And if you want to give more support, comments, you can join my Discord and talk with me there. And of course, liking the video also helps as well. So with that, I'm Nate. You can also call me Nathan. Please never call me Nathaniel. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.